Hey guys, it's your favorite youth pastor, Jermaine. I'm not gonna do a dance this week, but anyways, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe in this pandemic. I've been praying for you guys, my church family, my youth group. Um, yes, so this is like my weekly thing that I've been doing, and I'm actually like a week late, so you guys might get two this week. But anyways, my topic for this week is crisis leads to breakthrough, and um, I did what I always do. I looked up the words first. So my main two words are crisis and breakthrough. So the definition for crisis is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. And I have two definitions for breakthrough. The first one says a sudden, dramatic, and important discovery or development. That's number one. And number two, an instance of achieving success. So the verses that I'm going to be coming from today is Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. And I'm not going to read them up front. I'm just going to, as I go, I'm going to just read through the ones that I need. And you guys can make out what I'm trying to say. So I want to start off first by saying crisis comes in many forms, not just surface level things. Examples of crisis could be financial crisis, family crisis, alcoholism, drug addiction, relationship problems, identity crisis. But in those times when you're facing those things, don't run away from God, but run towards God, walk towards God. And you may be used to some abandonment in hard times, like most of the time when stuff get hard and tough and rocky and whatever. That's when you find yourself the most alone. That's when you find yourself without anyone. That's when you find yourself just in just a really bad space, so when you have those troubles, don't run from God. Use that time to get closer to God. Use that time to lean more on God. When things get rough and rocky, when things start to shake and crash, um, it reminded me of the story of the disciples in Mark 29 when they were in the boat and they were going through a storm, a very bad, crazy storm. The skies was dark, the wind was going crazy, the boat was like shaking ridiculously, and the disciples were scared. They were afraid. Just so happened that Jesus was in the boat with them, but he was sleeping. So what they did was they went and they woke him up, and he came out and he pretty much told the storm to calm down, and it did. So Jesus' next thing he said to them was, "You of little faith." That's you of little faith is what he said. And I just wanted to let you guys know that we have big problems, we have small problems, we have medium-sized problems, but we serve a God who is so much bigger than everything that we go through. So that's why it's important to just come to him with your problems, come to him with your trials, come to him with your storms. He'll get you through. He'll help you see the way to the other side. Um, but for those disciples who were in that boat, the waves crashing in that moment, the waves were their crisis. The waves is what they were going through. Um, but I'm going to read a few verses in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33, and I'm going to be looking up because I didn't bring my notes today. So yeah. Immediately, verse 22, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." So, for those, like I said, for those disciples, the raging of those waves in that time was considered, well, was the crisis in their life. And Jesus showed up for them. They didn't even ask. It doesn't say anywhere that they prayed. It just says that he woke up. He woke up, and he saw them out in the lake. So he decided to go out and rescue them. He sensed something was wrong. He noticed the raging waves, and he went out to rescue them. Not in the traditional way, but he chose to walk on water. And it doesn't say it in the text, but I'm assuming while he was walking towards them, he probably had his hands stretched out, reaching for them. And he was letting them know that you are not alone. I am here with you. I am here to save you. He even says in verse 27, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. And I think the disciples, they were afraid because it says they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. And I think they weren't expecting Jesus to walk on water. They weren't expecting that type of rescue. And from how they were just kind of like hanging out there, they was just expecting someone to come out and save them. They didn't know who was going to be. They just was expecting anyone. Like the way they were sitting there, they had like already phoned in someone to come get them. You know, like they were probably expecting another boat to show up. Or I looked at it like maybe they were just too afraid to call out and ask for help. Or maybe they thought depending on God, or maybe they thought they were depending on God for too much instead of calling for help. They were going to just sit there and wait. And I was thinking, if I'm honest, I do that sometimes. Like, I call myself saying I don't want to bother God too much. Like, I just, I relied on God every day this week. I just want to give him a break. But I have to remember, he wants that from us. He wants us to bother him. He wants us to lean on him for everything, big or small. And people need to get out of like comparing themselves, comparing their problems to other people's problems. Like, my problem isn't as big as Betty Joe's, so I'm not going to bring it to God. Bring it. Big, small, tiny, bring it. God wants it all. So from looking deeper, I feel like the disciples were looking in the wrong place for the rescue to happen. What Jesus was trying to let them know was that God is in control. What he was trying to let us know, us readers, know that God is in control. So when Jesus showed up, it caught them off guard because they wasn't expecting him to show up the way he showed up. And what happens next is probably how most of us would have reacted. Most of us would have been Peter. Most of us are Peter. Verse 28. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. I was thinking about the way Peter reacted. I probably would have reacted just the same way he did. You probably would have reacted the same way he did if you just see this guy walking on water. Peter was giving Jesus a check because I'm pretty sure all weekend people have been walking on water. Not. But Peter was just giving him a check. Verses 29 through 30 says, come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. How many of us are like Peter? We've been praying for breakthrough. God comes to our rescue, and we still question if it's really him. Then we start to walk, like we gain a little momentum. Okay, Jesus. Okay, God, it's you. But then something happens, and it like shakes us a little bit. So we look down. We lose sight of what's in front of us. We look down, and we fall down. We lose our balance. We lose our way of walking to the other side. And then we yell. And actually, that little wind that I'm talking about is the wind is like another crisis. Like, oh, I'm having a bad week. Something else happens in that week that makes your week that started off bad worse. Or if someone, say someone is like in your family has some type of cancer or sickness or something, and then you find out the following week that someone else has something. That's another thing that you got to deal with now. That's a crisis, you know. And those are those little crisis, those little things like when you're gaining momentum. That's the devil trying to get to you and try to like get you to forget about God. Oh, God's not here for me. God's not going to save me. But we forget that God does it time and time again for us. How can we continue to doubt someone that comes through for us in the clutch every time? But we do. I do it. Okay. So when we yell out, Lord, save me, God does not fight with us. He does not argue with us. But he says, verse 31, he says, you of little faith. He said, why did you doubt? It's just a simple question he asks us. Why did you doubt? I doubt. I've doubted God. You doubt. I'm pretty sure you've doubted God. We all doubt. The one that never lets us down is the one who we doubt the most. God comes through for us time and time again. God comes through us in the clutch, like Kobe shooting a layup. It's going in. That's how good God comes through for us, and we still doubt him time and time again. We're always in our own head, letting the devil in and telling us why this won't work, instead of trusting and believing that God's going to do what he said he was going to do, like he did last week, like he did last month, like he did last year. So what Jesus does next is so mind-blowing. Jesus, when Peter fell in, Jesus took his hand and he reached it down as far as he could go. And he pulled Peter out. He pulled him out. He caught him. It's like, Peter, I'm not going to let you fall, Peter. I'm on your side, Peter. I love you, Peter. That's what he did for him when he reached down and pulled him out. That's what he does for us. He reaches down. When we fall down, he reaches down even further to pull us out. I want to tell you guys something. Whatever you're experiencing, keep fighting, because you could be on the verge of breakthrough. Don't look down. Just keep your eyes focused on Jesus. From my experience, nothing about how God chooses to work in our lives is conventional. Sometimes we have our hearts set on how it's going to help us, sometimes we have our hearts set on how it's going to go, how it's going to happen, how God's going to come through. But we might as well just throw all of that out the window. It never happens that way. Like, get out of your own head. Let God do what God does. It's never going to happen the way you thought. God has power that puts pieces together that we couldn't even think of. And even if it doesn't go the way we thought, it goes the way God thought it would go, and it turns out being even better for us than we could have imagined. It ends up being way better. Verses 32 through 33 says, and when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. So, the same wind that was knocking against the boat that was in the lake, the same wind that caused Peter to take his eyes off of Jesus and doubt and fall into the water, eventually was the same wind that Jesus, the all-power Jesus, Almighty God, he calmed it. And once Jesus climbed into the boat, he calmed it. That should just let us know. That everything is better with God on your side. It takes God coming through in the clutch for us to recognize who he is, when we should recognize that automatically. This pandemic has been a crisis. Not just for me, but for my family, for your family, I'm sure. Things have changed, like stuff has happened that you didn't know was going to happen. Like you've probably experienced a lot of trials. But when we make it through to the other side, remember that once Jesus comes into our boat and shows up, that we can also walk on water too. So don't look down. Keep your eyes focused on him. Thank you, guys. That's all I have.